What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Check Engine Podcast, the only podcast produced by three winners of IMSA's Spirit of the Race Award from the 2015 Salen's 6 Hours of the Glen. Behind the controls and his usual post, I've got Tristan. Tristan, how are you today?
I'm fully 75% functional. I'm missing one thumb, but I'm still in the game.
Do you know where it is?
It's still attached, just not functional.
Oh.
Yeah.
One thumb is 25% of your total utility.
Yeah. It's one hand out of three.
I feel like the ratio's off there.
I think it is a little bit.
I think we need to redo your math.
Unless you spend your day picking up buttons.
I pick up screws almost too small to see.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's
it's almost
legit.
50%.
Sure.
I can't use my toes for that, so it's almost 50% of my utility.
Okay, I guess we stand corrected on that one.
Me too. I said 25%.
So Tristan is here. Flanking me to my left is Andrew. Andrew, how are we?
I'm definitely better than he is because I'm fully functional.
You have both thumbs?
I have all of my limbs.
All thumbs, all extremities.
Yes.
Opposable thumbs are taken way too much for granted.
So welcome to the Biology Podcast.
Welcome to the Biology
Tonight we're going to
Podcast.
be talking thumbs.
Thumbs. Hooray! No, this is the Check Engine Podcast. My name is Nick. And if you were perusing around, Google Play or iTunes or Spotify or Pocket Cast or Anchor.fm or anywhere podcasts are streamed and you were looking for a professional automotive podcast.
Congratulations.
We're sorry.
You haven't found it.
You haven't found it yet. Keep scrolling. Keep moving.
But we're better. We're better than the pros.
We're better than the pros. We keep it light. We're not journalists. We're not employees of any race teams or car companies or anything like that. We're just fans of the automobile, fans of motorsports, and we'd like to discuss those things on the air, and we'd like to have you join in as well. So you can find us at our website at checkenginepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our episodes, blogs, information about us. We have email addresses. There's inbox at checkenginepodcast.com, or you can reach any of us individually, Nick, Tristan, or Andrew at checkenginepodcast.com. We're on social. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, and we have Instagram at Check Engine Podcast for Facebook, and then Twitter and Insta are both at Check Engine Pod. Please like, please share. But I think something that's pretty important here, we want you guys to comment. We want to hear back from you. We don't want to just talk at you. We want to talk with you. So be sure to share opinions on current or past episodes. Give us episode ideas if you have any. If you take issue with an opinion that one of us has, be sure to let us know about it. Let's get a dialogue going. That's very important. So find us on the socials, and let's get into tonight's episode. Andrew, we're diving into like a family tree tonight. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, tonight I think we're going to do some car oral histories. We're going to do our family trees. Because I think when we start talking about these things, we're going to realize not only that the cars that you've been in your past have affected what you drive today, but also that just asking the question, what was the car that, whoever it was, what was Dad's car when I was born? You're just going to get a flood of information. I know I certainly did. I asked that question to one of my brothers, and he was just gone. He was telling me every car. He was looking up pictures. He was doing all this. And I never asked for any of that. I just asked him the make and model of one car. And I think each of us is gonna be able to relate to that.
We all have, I think, a similar story that we can get into on that, as far at least getting the information for this podcast. Do you want to start, though, as we always do, with a couple of pace laps? Do we have a couple of pace laps? Or are we just going to do a standing start tonight and just go straight to green?
I got a really good one. I got a really important one. It's going to shake up the very foundations of this podcast.
Okay.
I got a dash cam like a wild Slavic scumbag now.
Oh my.
It was the cheap one. It's Old Shark brand. That's literally the brand. Old Shark.
Sounds like a Nordic feast instead of a
I think it's
dash cam.
extremely Chinese.
So we need to post some of your dash cam vids on the
I
socials
suppose.
when they're ready.
There must be. I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting that's
How long have
happened.
you had it?
I've actually owned it for a few months. I got it at like a Black Friday sale.
Sure.
And then just didn't bother to put it in my car until it got warm, which now that there's 4 inches of snow on the ground.
And 3 to 6 more coming in the next couple of days.
Yeah, exactly.
2 weeks after Easter is when we're recording this, by the way.
Yeah. But if anything cool happens, I'll share that. You know what? Since I got that, I haven't seen a single car fire since I installed it.
Oh,
Oh, no. We need to take that back out then.
I guess.
We need to rectify that situation really quick. Anybody else have any pace laps? Anything? Any news items we wanted to talk about? Or
I had an interesting experience. We were talking about the snowstorm, and in kind of the neat car news the other day, I was driving home through the very beginning of it, and it was very, very nasty. It had been raining earlier in the day, had turned to ice, and snow was starting to cover it, and it was, just a land of 15-mile-an-hour freeways.
Yeah.
Except for myself, because I am a reckless all-wheel drive Subaru driver, and a man in a TTRS.
That makes a lot of sense.
500 horsepower.
You in 5 years, basically.
Yeah, hopefully, if this all works out.
When this podcast
takes off.
Yeah, it was me and my future self is what it was. And 500 horsepower.
Didn't we have a hashtag right at the beginning of this podcast, the first couple, like hashtag
Fund my
Audi?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, that's wow.
We did.
Wow,
Yeah,
what a recall.
Yeah.
And
Not just a pretty face, Andrew.
it was interesting to see it in the wild, in the nasty, because it was entirely untroubled by what was going on.
Yeah.
You'd think that with all that power, all the torque, even with all-wheel drive, there'd be, some kind of dancing around the weather. No, we were just driving down the freeway as two people do in good weather when everybody else was struggling mightily. And I will drive as slow as I feel like I need to drive, and if the conditions were bad, I won't recklessly speed. But it was just this TTRS and myself bombing down the freeway because everything was fine with us, and it was interesting to see it, not as something on a show floor at an auto show or something, kind of driven to the track to be all polished up and shown off. It was interesting to see one kind of living its best life, mushing through the snow, Quattro, like the commercials. It was very interesting to see.
Was there an old man in a tow truck shouting off the overpass?
Yeah, he was watching us go by.
What is this? Obviously, listeners, you wouldn't know this. These guys have just been talking in commercial jingles, 90s commercial jingles all night, and I don't.
That was
not
not
alone
a
if you
90s
didn't
commercial.
get
That was far more recent.
Far more recent.
Oh, 2001 probably. You think it crested the? Don't
Yes.
look at me like that.
We need to record these on video because you need to see the look I'm giving him right now.
Yeah, it's not a pretty
used to
one.
it.
It's not a pretty one.
All right, listen. Let's get into this.
Let's dive
There
in.
are going to be fewer commercial jingles ahead, maybe, unless you remember the theme song for all these cars. So
Not all of them.
Oh, man,
not
here we
all
go.
of them. Not all of them.
You're gonna put us to the test?
Yeah, I wish I could, honestly. That might be actually a fun episode if we go
Car
back
jingles?
to
Car jingle?
go back into the commercials for the cars.
Yeah.
And look at how they were sold initially, especially if they're in model that's still around now. Like the old Outback commercials, those are absurd and a little xenophobic.
Oh man.
That would be a good episode, though.
Let us
That'd
know
be fun.
let us know if you guys want to hear that because I think we'd have some interesting things to laugh about when we do that one. Kind of maybe game show style, listeners. Let us
Ooh, yeah.
let us know what you think. We might do that one for you.
That'd be fun.
That'd be fun. All right, Andrew. Let's start climbing your family automotive tree.
Yeah, so the way I started was just to go back as far as my parents. I know very little about my grandparents' car loyalties, except I know that on my dad's side, he just told me this recently, they were a huge Pontiac family back in the day. I didn't know that because he's never owned a Pontiac as long as I've been alive, but apparently that was a thing. So before I was born, my mom's cars, her first car was a Ford Maverick.
Oh.
I don't remember the jingle for that one.
No, I don't either. I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. It was the consumer grade Mustang.
Okay.
More or less.
Okay.
And her next car, her first family car, this just stunned me when I found this out. It was a Plymouth Gold Duster. So
Oh, it wasn't the Duster.
No. The Gold
Duster.
Duster. So the Plymouth Duster.
Man, I forgot Plymouths even existed.
But all gold. Gold exterior, gold interior,
Oh
gold.
my.
I mean, like the whole thing was gold. And
like it was custom made for Trump?
No, this actually had somewhat less style.
Oh.
If you can believe that. But it was a specific trim level, and it had that written on the side, on the front quarter panel, Gold Duster.
Oh my.
Man.
Was any actual gold dust used? I would wonder.
I don't know. It could have been in the paint, possibly, because it was like a somewhat reflective.
It was like the
gold
metal
paint.
flake style
metal
type
flake.
of...
But it was probably like mercury or something back then.
Yeah, it's very
super
dangerous.
toxic. Then her next car, continuing this somewhat historic lineage, was a Dodge Omni.
Oh.
Ooh.
I have one of those in an offshoot of the family tree, for sure. One of my dad's uncles had one. I actually saw that car. Yeah.
So that was when my brothers were older, and when they were just before she got rid of that car, the only door that worked was the hatch. So they had to crawl into the car through the hatch.
Well, at least if someone tries to be a jerk and like park you in so you can't get into your doors, you're used to
Yeah,
it.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nope.
But so that was kind of up to the point when I was born. My dad's first car was a 77 or 78 Pontiac Firebird Formula. And this is the car I've heard. This is the car of legend that I've heard about from him his whole life.
Shrouded in mystery.
No, shrouded in regret because he ended up selling
selling
it.
it. Oh,
no.
But the color, he always says it, Buccaneer red with white leather interior, and then it's just like this like wistful look goes across his face, and he just kind of like fades out for a second there. But it's almost like a orangey red, slightly orange.
Like almost like literally the Tampa Bay Buccaneers color red.
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah. But he sold that to a cousin of his and bought a blue Firebird, which he only has ever described as a blue Firebird because I guess he didn't like it as much as the red one.
He doesn't get to the interior in the description. He
No.
just didn't like it as much.
I mean, he's missing that extra horsepower the red paint adds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
Well, the Firebird Formula also said Formula on the door sills. But it was not the one with the big Firebird emblem on the hood.
I was just going to ask.
If you search if you search for that was actually, I think, like part of the Trans Am
Yes.
appearance pack.
Sure.
Yes. Yep.
So his didn't have the big bird, but the Formula was something else. I didn't bother to do a little Wikipedia hole on this one, but yeah, he still regrets selling that red one. And then after he got rid of the blue one because he probably didn't like it that much, and then he bought an '84 Chevy Blazer, which was actually interesting because it was red, but then the bottom of the door panels was black.
Yep.
It's actually like a pretty cool looking car.
They had very cool schemes on the Trailblazers back then.
Yeah, and the Blazer was really one of the first
The Blazer, not Trailblazer, I apologize.
Real, American consumer grade SUVs. You could always get Jeeps and a bunch of other things, like a specialty, but it's like, yeah, I'll just mosey over to the Chevy dealer and get myself a Blazer. And those early Blazers were actually very capable in the off-road department, which was kind of the first big stroke into the SUV market from the Americans. You had stuff like Jeeps and Land Rovers and Land Cruisers and all the stuff like that was more specialized, but it was you see them in a ton of movies and stuff like that too. It was like, oh, I got my SUV. It's like that same generation Blazer that your dad had.
Yeah. I didn't know any details about that car actually. My brother sent me a picture of, not obviously my dad's, but of a car that was exactly like it, and I was really kind of shocked at how good it looked. So my dad had kind of stuck in the GM family there, but then I was born, and the Blazer was a two-door, so they had to, I guess, get something bigger. My mom got a Oldsmobile Regency 98.
Okay.
I think it was an 87. She probably got it the year before I was born. White exterior, all maroon interior.
Ooh.
All maroon. Like the seat belts and everything. There's a picture of me as a small little baby in that car. Do
you actually remember it or only from pictures?
I don't know. That's what I was just going to say. We talk about we talked about starting from cars that you remember, but the difficulty with that is it can be hard to tell when you really remember a car.
Or what you've been told so many times that you feel like you remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, I definitely feel like I remember that car, and it was around for a while, so it's very possible, but at the same time, I'm not positive. So my dad still had the Blazer for a while. Eventually, the Oldsmobile got wrecked in an accident.
Ah,
My dad sold the Blazer. My mom got a Honda Accord. And my dad got a Ford Escort.
is that the one you learned to drive stick in?
It is not.
Oh.
So this, I think based on my estimates and the cars that they had, I think this was probably about 93.
Okay.
So around that same time, my brothers were old enough to drive. They needed cars. So they bought a 78 Pontiac Catalina
Okay.
that was rusted to shit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was mechanically okay. But I remember it looked like it had chicken pox. That's how many rust spots were on it. And it was a kid's car. So eventually, like, the bumper got replaced with wood, the rear bumper, and they used red tape to make one of the taillights. They called that the Yellow Bomb. Is what they called that car.
Like your brothers
Yeah,
called
my
it the
brothers
Yellow
called it
Bomb?
the Yellow Bomb, and
Okay.
and the parents too. So that was the first car they got because my brothers are 2 years apart. Then my mom's parents, the grandparents, gave the kids their 1980 Grand Prix, which got the name Blue Bomb. I don't know why, but probably because they were very similar. Tristan's on his phone during my soliloquy.
I'm just clarifying a detail.
Okay, sure.
Because I have what I believe to avoid a penalty.
Oh!
In my list, I believe I have what is a factual error, and I'm clarifying it with the source.
Wow.
So I want to
That's
make sure.
dedication. Okay, so yeah, that would probably be like 93, 95 area. So my brothers went to college. My dad's first Escort was red. One brother got that. My dad replaced it with a pink one. It's pink. We'll post a picture of the. I mean, fuchsia is about the best I can do
sure.
going towards red, but it wasn't red. And my other brother bought a 90s Trans Am. And those are really the cars of my childhood. Those are the ones that, somewhere in that nebulous region between remember and truly know. It's funny because one of the things I've always wanted to own is a car with a red interior, specifically red, and I wanted red seatbelts. That was really, really important. And that was like bucket list level. It sounds dumb, but I always wanted a car with red seatbelts. I have that in my current car, and it was actually a huge factor in me buying the car.
And it's because...
I don't know. But the Oldsmobile had a maroon interior. It had the maroon seatbelts. I don't know if that plays a role, but I think it's funny that was something that I always wanted, and it just otherwise it can't have come from anywhere, right? That's a really weird thing to want.
Sure. From what I've noticed so far, there hasn't really been any brand allegiance to what to the history of the family cars here.
Not really. My mom definitely no. My dad, like I said, came from a Pontiac family, I guess. My grandparents, now that I think about it, only ever owned Pontiacs. But he kind of stayed in the GM brand with the Chevy Blazer, but then went to Ford. I asked my brother if he thought there might have been any reason for that, and he thought maybe just pure cost at that point. He said you get a new Escort at that time for about $6,000.
Oh.
So, so maybe that was it.
It was the price point.
Yeah,
It was the price point.
I mean, after that, it's interestingly more straightforward. We're kind of at the point in the mid to late 90s where you can almost see that cars were slowly getting more reliable. Mm-hmm. Where, that like my mom's Honda Accord, she had that, I want to say, until I was in high school. I think it was around for a while. Same with my dad's Escort. My dad traded that Escort in for a first generation Escape.
I remember that Escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what year the Escape came out. I didn't look it up, unfortunately, but that was also in the 2000s, I think. I think that might have been... That might have been 03 or 04. Yeah.
3 or 4-ish.
So both those cars were around for a while.
If you're listening, cite the sources for us. Is
Yeah,
it 03
sure.
or 04?
But yeah. So the Accord finally died in a fairly serious car accident. My mom got rear-ended at the kind of dangerous intersection up the hill going into my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
A woman was killed there just a few years before my mom had that accident, doing the same thing, turning left. Someone rear-ended him and pushed her into traffic.
Oof.
So yeah, that died that way. The Escort got traded in. And then my mom kind of ran through a bunch of different cars. She had a Sentra, a Nissan Sentra, a Toyota Avalon, Toyota Camry. Eventually she got to a Chevy Cobalt. And,
Oh, no.
well, the Cobalt was interesting, and this one I really remember because the Camry, my mom has horrible luck. She got rear-ended again in that Camry.
Oh, no.
And that totaled that car. And we bought the Chevy Cobalt from a neighbor who just happened to want to sell it. They got something else. And that was initially going to become my car because she had been driving my Elantra, the car that I wrote the blog post about in the interim, and she really liked it. But then she got the Cobalt and it had more power, and my mom, low key likes fast cars.
There you go.
So
Chicks dig fast cars.
Yeah, I get that.
yeah.
That's my mom too.
So she had the Cobalt, traded in on a Toyota Venza, the first generation of that, and that's the car she still has today. My dad has kind of stuck with SUVs, and he went from the Escape and had a couple other ones, and now he's in a RAV4. Like, SUVs are kind of like car end games in a lot of ways. That's kind of where you tend to stay. It seems like once you get
stop
there.
caring.
Yeah. A couple other things from my brothers. They're also really interesting. So my oldest brother drove that red Escort. I mean, I don't even know how long he had it until it was way past dead, I think.
Okay.
Until actually maybe quite literally one of the wheels fell off.
That could very well be. That's definitely the way he is. Then he ran out and bought an Escort ZX2.
Okay.
Oh,
I remember that car because it was green, and I thought it was so cool. Like we
light
flew out
green,
to see
dark
him.
green.
It was actually kind of an in-between.
Okay.
And don't say
For
British
the
Racing Green.
ZX2. No, it wasn't that. We'll have to look it up, but it wasn't like super dark, and it wasn't very, like lime green. I remember we flew out to see him in California, and I thought that was the coolest car ever.
Rolling around California in a green ZX2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he had that forever. He might have had like a Toyota Highlander in between, but the next car I definitely remember him driving was an E92 BMW. So that was like 08, 07, 08. He had that car forever.
Yeah, he did.
He's a biochemist. He could buy a really nice car if he wanted to. He just doesn't. But he's had that E92 since brand new, and it got wrecked last year. But we didn't know because he fought for 4 months with the insurance company to get them to repair that BMW. He wouldn't accept the payout check.
He wouldn't let him total it.
He wouldn't let him total it. He fought with them for months to keep that car.
I really loved it, I guess.
I know, and I never knew that about him. But eventually, yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I have one of those I should have done that for as well.
Yeah, definitely. So that's my oldest brother. My older brother, he's had a car menagerie. I mean, since that Grand Am that he went to college with, he's had some edited highlights at a Wrangler, 2 1960s Grand Prix.
Grand Prix.
He owned a CRX for a while,
Ooh.
which was pretty cool, actually. He had a BMW X1, a Chevy S10, and he's really gravitated to Dodge since then. So he had a Magnum SRT, which was really cool. I think he regrets selling that one a little bit. But he sold that for a Challenger RT when those came out.
Oh, okay.
Because they had like the color he wanted, toxic orange it was. It was like a darker metallic orange. He really wanted that. Then he got rid of that because he had a kid. Bought an SRT Challenger when they reconfigured the engines. So the SRT motor, then they added a supercharged one. That's what it was.
Yes.
And the old SRT motor got knocked down one level. So he bought a new Challenger. He has that car now. And for his family car, he just bought a Jetta. So,
well,
hey.
all right.
yeah, I mean...
You could do far worse.
And that my older brother, he's the one who gave me the whole family history illustrated when I asked about the year of my dad's Blazer. That was the question.
He just went all out.
I imagine an immense dusty tome.
Yeah,
That he
absolutely.
laid it on the desk and boom.
He's got a great memory for this. I mean, he knows every year of every single car for sure. He remembers the exterior color and remembers the interior color, and can tell you how the car died. And he's just got a great memory for it. And yeah, I mean, looking through, we definitely don't have any brand allegiance.
I mean, Dodge for a little bit for your brother there at the end.
That's a personal thing because he liked the older Pontiacs that my grandparents had. And kind of, when you look at car lineups, Dodge is the only one that makes cars like that still. Big V8s, bigger cars, kind of across the whole lineup. And really, when you look at the Challenger, that is kind of an anachronism when it comes to cars on the market. It exists on its own in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
I mean, I look for...
And not you. You've had two Hyundais, right?
I've had two Hyundais and a Saturn, yeah.
And were you the only person to ever have a Hyundai in your family?
Oh, shoot, no, I forgot about that. How could I forget about that one? My older brother, the one with the menagerie of cars, the one I forgot to mention, but I did mention it in the blog post. He had a Elantra GT the year before I got mine, which is actually what made my dad buy that car for me, as I think I mentioned in the post.
Yes.
So, but I mean, he loves to buy and sell cars. It's one of his hobbies. And, so it's hard to keep track.
Well, that was just, I wanted to just kind of bring that up because I think with Tristan and I, when we go through this, it's very easy to see where we get our allegiances from. And since there was it didn't seem like there was any brand allegiance going on there. It was just kind of all over the place. Like, man, how did Andrew land on a Hyundai as his car of choice?
No, that's definitely where it started. With my older brother owning that Elantra GT, and my dad getting the Elantra for me, and then when I went to buy this car, I mean, I drove a ton of stuff. I drove everything in the segment that I was looking for, and it just came down to a difference between value and what I wanted in a car.
Sure.
Where it was basically this car that I bought, the Veloster, or the Civic Si, the new Civic Si. And the price there was about $5,000 difference. I don't think the SI is $5,000 better. And that was really the deciding factor.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, that kind of trickles down. So my wife bought a Hyundai when she bought her car based on my recommendation. So, I mean, that trail follows.
There it goes.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, as you mentioned, I think it's pretty straightforward. My family tree's pretty short, so I'll get mine out of the way. Much like you mentioned, some of your family members keep their cars as long as they possibly can. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a trademark of my family as well. There's kind of a shift. There's kind of a line that gets drawn where there's a big change. Early on, there was a lot of Mopar. There was Chrysler New Yorker, two, I believe, Dodge Poleras.
Polera?
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that one.
Yep. And then there were a few other kind of bits and bobs thrown in there. One of my dad's, he calls
Describe
it...
for the audience a bip and a bob.
It's, one-offs where it's like, oh, this one time there was a Chevy Caprice, or, it's like, but it wasn't a trend.
The bip trim?
Yeah, exactly.
The bip trim.
But still, my dad considers his Mercedes to be the greatest car of all time. So
what did he have?
1962 Mercedes 220B.
Wow. Okay.
Regret that I asked. That means nothing.
And it is, in his mind, the best car ever. That's because he was in the driver's seat. I think if you ran that poll for my mom, who was most often the one behind it pushing it, she may not vote that as the greatest car of all time. It was where you had to park it on a hill to make sure you could start it because maybe the starter would turn over.
So I was going to say, with his driveway now,
it would be great.
Yeah, it's perfect.
But that was supposedly the greatest car of all time, according to him. But again, it was the one-off. That is the one Mercedes he's ever owned.
It'll do that to you.
But where that line in the sand got drawn, which was appropriate considering the color. Was the Volkswagen Rabbit. That was a 1977 Volkswagen Rabbit.
Wow.
As the guy who sold them this car called it Dakota Beige, all one word, Dakota Beige, and it was very beige.
Well, let's hope so.
Otherwise, they did a really bad job naming the color.
Well, I mean, as we've discussed in previous episodes, those color names don't always make sense unless you pull a Saturn and it's called red.
Yes.
So, but there was a very beige car, and it was the first Volkswagen product that they were introduced to. And again, other than some forays into just probably whatever was available, that really started the foundation of my car family history. They go from that Rabbit to a 1984 Renault Encore.
A Renault?
Yep.
Wow. No one's owned a Renault. That's amazing.
That was when they were, I think a lot of parts for those were actually being made in Wisconsin at the time.
Really?
Yeah. And there is an interesting story that I believe we have a potential forthcoming episode. I don't want to spoil too much, but where we're going to have some interviews of people, and I think one of those might be our fathers at some point coming up here. I would love to have him tell you that story.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll come back to the Renault Encore in a future episode as far as stories go. But around that same time, my mom picked up the first Audi. It was 1984. It was Audi 80 or 4000 at the S trim level. So depending on where it was sold, depending on where you're listening to,
that's a really long badge.
It was the
like that went across the whole trunk.
Audi 80
or
the 4000S, depending on where you bought it. And I believe hers was badged as a 4000.
You mean like where in the country here?
We're in the world, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do they call it in the U.S.?
4000S. Hers is a 4000S.
There you go.
But hey, people may recognize it as an 80 or a 90 because that's a very common, especially if you're an Audi person, that's a common way to look at them. So I wanted to put them both in there. But that was our family's first foray into Audi, proper after joining Volkswagen Group with the Rabbit. And then my mom held on to that car forever. That was a 1984, Audi 80, Audi 4000. And that car was still the one I came home from the hospital in 1987, and the one that I was going to school in until 1997.
Whoa.
Wow.
So
That's
she kept that one for a while. The date on my dad's cars in that space, one of them's a question mark. He had a Merkur Scorpio.
A Merkur. Whoa.
Yep.
You guys have had some
Weird
wild
cars.
cars.
Like I said, I think it mostly just
Where
comes
are
down
these
to
coming
what was
from?
available at the time.
Wow.
Although they have since done far better for themselves, it was while they were digging themselves out of medical school.
Merkur was an offshoot of Ford, right?
It was. Yep. It was another way of saying Mercury.
I was just going to say, it's not Mercury.
But it wasn't technically a Mercury, it was something else, but that
They wanted to make it fancy.
Yeah. But if you looked in the right places, if you look inside the engine compartment, deep inside the door sills, you will find pieces of blue oval in places all over the inside of that car.
Andrew just pulled up a picture. It
I
looks
did.
just like a Ford.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like a Ford.
It looks like an old Ford.
And then that's where, again, after they kind of stabilized themselves and, had a regular income and everything, then the Audis kind of started coming in a pretty regular progression, although, again, spaced out. They keep their cars forever. There was in 1997, when that car, that original Audi 4000, was replaced by my mom, that was a 1997 A4 that you guys probably heard in the first Cars episode.
Mm-hmm. I remember that car.
Yeah, one of the ones that I learned to drive on. And then she moved to a 2008 Audi A4. That was the next one. She kept that car forever, and it wasn't even purchased in 2008. That's the best part. It was probably purchased in 2013 or 14. So she bought it used, and it was 2008. So she kept her 1997 thing for almost 16, 17 years.
Dang.
And then my dad had a 1994 A6. That was pre-Quattro for him. It was just that was just a front-wheel drive. And then he bought a 2000 A6. That was, again, in the first Cars episode. That was that...
The dark green one?
Dark green, kind of rare. 2000 4.2-liter V8 with all the A8 front-endery going on. And that was, again, one of the ones I learned to drive on. That 97 A4 and the 2000 A6 were my starter cars.
I love that A6.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
And then my dad had the first, I believe, the 2005, early 2006, when they did the first major facelift on the GTI recently. So that was his next car after that green A6.
We're going to have to get in the story about that GTI, that one stormy night.
Yes.
Maybe not this episode, but that's got to
We
come.
have like a fish tales story of
Fishtails.
the wild stories that we've had in the cars.
It's actually a really good idea there.
And then he then moved on after, again, we're talking about horrible accidents. He wrecked that GTI in a relatively significant accident.
Yeah.
Someone was turning into a left-hand entrance for them across his lane and got distracted by their baby.
Buh.
Excellent that neither of them were injured or killed. Got distracted by their baby, looked back while still turning, and turned right in front of my dad.
Oh, my God.
I believe that was a Honda, potentially an Accord, that the entire side was just gone, just obliterated. Luckily, it was the passenger side, and both of them were on the driver's side. And the entire front end of that GTI was functionally gone. So that one, rest in pieces. And then he moved on to a relatively new Passat in 2012, I believe. Again, bought it used. And so we've stayed pretty constant. You can see where my Audi Volkswagen fandom came from. I'm also a relatively big fan of Jeeps, and that stirred a little response in my dad's the deepest, darkest corners of his heart that still had the little Mopar shoulder patches on his jacket were still in there. So he likes that Jeep way more than he should, considering it's in a only partially functional state, taking up space in his garage right now.
Yeah, but it's the Freedom Edition. So.
It's a Freedom Edition, and it is the near and dear to his heart. It's got a Pentastar in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's why he's so attached. But yeah, a lot of Dodge, and then just a lot of Volkswagen Group stuff here and there.
A lot of German.
My sister has had
Schnitzel for everybody.
Yeah, my sister had 2 bright yellow Volkswagen Beetles.
Oh, that's right.
And I had a whole succession of A4 sedans and station wagons and a Passat, and per the hashtag earlier, really want to return to one someday. Hashtag fund my Audi.
Hashtag fund my Audi.
But so that's where that love comes from, and so that's an odd outlier that I bought a Subaru this time around. But I think it's informed by the fact that I feel most at home in all-wheel drive wagons, and that's what the Outback really is, despite all the marketing around it being a crossover.
I was going to say, let's see, you bought the two years ago?
No. One year,
Yeah,
just
coming
in March.
up on a year, right.
Actually, just a little over a year. Yeah.
Did they even make an A4 wagon or an A6 wagon for those years?
Not A6, and the A4 is only technically the all-road version.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, see, there you go.
Yeah.
Really didn't have the option.
No. I could have gone with another Jeep. My sister did. She was very impressed by my Grand Cherokee and wanted her own, so we got her the little Renegade. Her name is Brenna, so we've been consistently joking, but have not yet followed through on finding what font they use for that, and getting a B to add in front of it, and calling it the Brennegade. Have not done that yet, but need to. So she's in a Jeep. I'm in a Subaru. My parents are both in Volkswagen products, and barring anything significant, I will probably stay in one of those 3, because we're talking about car end game. I'm definitely in the car end game at all of 30 years old. I'm an old man at heart, in my car heart.
Oh yeah, man, you're gonna be settled real soon. Couple kids, throw them in the back of the Subaru, throw them in the roof rack,
Throw them on the roof rack.
Throw them in the Sub.
Isn't that
I think
what you
that's illegal.
I see. I don't have kids.
You will. And I don't either. I say that like it's a threat, like I have kids, but I don't.
You will.
For the record, no one recording this podcast has any children.
And from the sounds of it, don't let any of us have children.
Yeah,
No, you
be
put
thankful
it
for that.
in the toolbox on the roof. The
You
toolbox.
can strap them in.
Oh, God, I wish you guys could see the magnificent eye roll.
That was big.
Yeah,
I
it
thought
was
they
a
were gonna
big
fall
eye
out.
roll.
That was an exaggerated eye roll.
With that, Nick, let's go to you. What do you say?
All right, yeah.
Enough about me. Let's talk about you.
Okay. Are we on a date? What is this about? Jeez.
It's a deflection. I want to change the subject because Andrew's getting weird. Let him get weird
No,
about.
I got weird.
Let him get weird about your stuff.
Okay.
I made it weird, sure.
Okay.
You did.
You did. Babies and roof racks and stuff.
He
Anyway,
doesn't know how to child. It's okay.
it's so easy to tell where Tristan gets his all-wheel drive affinity from by hearing his family history. And for those of you who have heard leading up to this point, I am the resident General Motors or leader of the Bowtie Brigade, I guess you can say. And when I get into this, you're going to see exactly why. So earlier I asked my dad, I told him, hey, look, I remember, since I've been alive, I remember a good amount of them. Anything that you could add, I don't need everything, but just some cars that like stick out, like for you, your family, or from what mom had or anything like that. And he responded in about 8 minutes with a detailed list, including the year, make, model, and color of every car that he or my mom has owned since they've been married. And later on this year, that will be 35 years. So congratulations, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, nice.
But so in the last 35 years, between the two of them, there have been 25 cars in 35 years.
It's a few.
24 of the 25 are from the General Motors family.
Wow. Oh, wow. I'm interested to hear this list.
So you
Wow.
I'm not going to break down all 25 of these because we don't have the time, but I did do a numbers breakdown, okay? So 25 cars total. 12 Chevys, 3 each GMC, Buick, and Cadillac. We had 2 Oldsmobiles,
Ooh, wow.
and the one outlier. I don't know if you knew me at this point. I think you may remember this. Tristan, I know, definitely does. The one outlier, the car that we affectionately called the Bullet.
The Bullet. Yep.
The 2000 Chrysler LHS.
Oh, my God. Oh, yes.
The champagne-colored Chrysler.
That.
I think you remember that car.
I do
Yep.
remember that
The Bullet.
car.
Aptly named when in the hands of Nick.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, I always thought that was a pretty car.
That was a very nice. It's very low, very sleek.
It was also remarkably comfortable.
Yeah.
I could fall asleep in that car anytime.
Well, I mean, you can fall asleep anywhere,
Well, yeah.
but
But usually not sitting up.
but
LHS. Wow, I can't believe I forgot
and
about that.
it remarkably comfortable. We never could figure out. We never really just bothered to look up what LHS meant. So we settled on luxury heated seats.
That's probably what it was.
Yeah, definitely.
That's probably what they.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and immensely comfortable, and it was fun to mess with people like in the summer, and like you don't tell people you had those heated seats, and you turn them on. I've had many a friend yell, "My ass is on fire," riding in the passenger seat of that car.
It's a stunning thing to say.
It is. It is.
Just not gonna say to
But
anybody.
so that was the one outlier, the one Chrysler. Also, this is my dad's. He has had 4 Corvettes.
Wow.
Still owns 2 of them. So there was the 63 split window, which was the one that I learned to drive stick in back in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
One that he still owns now is a 69 Stingray. You guys have seen it. He stored it in my garage here for the winter.
Yep.
That beautiful custom 2-tone copper. It was white when he bought it, and his buddy owned a body shop, so they went in after hours and painted this 2-tone copper. Cool thing about that car is, like your dad regretted selling his.
Mm-hmm.
My dad kicked himself and kicked himself and kicked himself for selling that car. He found in our basement a something from like when he originally bought it, some sort of like certificate, COA or something like that had the VIN on it. And this is I don't know how ethical this really is. My mom worked at a town hall / police department. She ran the VIN. She ran the VIN, and essentially my dad tracked this guy down and said, hey, just knocked at his door and just said, hey, I used to own the car that's in your garage. I found this in my basement. It goes with the car. You may want it. The guy said, oh, that's very cool. Kind of weird, but thanks. And my dad just wrote down his phone number and said, if you ever think of selling that car, you call me first. And he kind of kept badgering the guy. The guy never moved, never budged. But finally, my dad got a call from this guy, and it was essentially a retirement present to himself. He got his old car back.
Nice.
Which it's a really cool story. He also had a 1986, a C3, a black one. It was actually in Phoenix, so he and my Uncle John flew out to Phoenix and then drove that home. They road tripped it back. And then the other one he currently owns is the 1997, the C5. And he found that one in North Carolina. So he and my mom flew out to North Carolina and then road tripped that one back.
Tires are good. All's good.
Yeah, that's right. That was what the guy told him. Tires are good.
All's good.
All's good. Done might want to watch out for the radiator. So some other ones that stuck out in this family history. You guys have seen my dad before. He's going a little gray now. Got the salt and pepper going, but black hair, black facial hair, black pupils, like everything. And
he looks like a character from like a nemesis, angry enemy character from a cartoon,
right?
But like the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet.
But that's the thing; like he's very intimidating to look at, and he always wore suits, to work. And he had, in winter the long trench coat, and he had a 1985 Cadillac Eldorado that was black on black on black on black.
Oh my god! Yikes!
And he also had a 1988 Buick Regal T-Type. That was black on black on black on black. So he looked like he was a straight mafia hitman for a few years.
Sure.
What Serbian mafia?
Certainly, I don't know anything about one.
Exactly. There was one of the earliest cars I actually remember when I was a kid was my mom had a 1989 Buick Regal. It was white with a red interior. And the reason I remember this one so much is because it had really, really funky electronics in it. And when I say that, I mean it just died all the time. Like nothing wrong. You wouldn't hear a noise. None of the gauges would be weird. You wouldn't smell anything, and it just go, and just completely go dark. Gauges shut off, motor shut off. We'd coast to a stop, and it actually got to the point. I can barely even talk about this, where the odometer would spin backwards.
No.
So you sold it with 0 miles on it.
We sold it with less miles on it than when we bought it.
Oh my god.
Like as you would drive, the miles would go down instead of up. Oh man, I miss that car.
Oh boy.
A couple other things here. He highlighted. I'm going to say exactly what he wrote here because he put them stacked on top of one another. 2005 Cadillac CTS, black, front wheel drive, always got stuck in the snow.
Was there front wheel drive?
Rear wheel. Long day. 2005 Cadillac CTS black, rear wheel drive, always got stuck in the snow.
Sure.
The line below it. 2009 Cadillac CTS all-wheel drive, never gets stuck in the snow.
Okay,
that's the one my mom currently drives, is a 2009 Cadillac CTS. It's easy to tell where my affinity for General Motors comes from and for the Corvette. Learned to drive stick on a Corvette. There was also the 1978 GMC Suburban, 3/4 ton.
Did it have ambulance doors?
In the back?
Yeah. Because if it did, my dad would be super jealous.
I think it did. I'll have to ask my dad and do a follow-up on that. I do remember it because at the time my dad had a pretty big boat too. And the boat was the size of our garage. So the only thing that could tow it was a vehicle that was the size of our house. And that's what the Suburban was.
We lived in it for 2 years.
It was perfect for pulling the boat, but my dad says here only 10 miles per gallon from California.
Wow.
So that's a trip.
Yeah.
So for me, obviously the 97 Chevy Tahoe was a part of this list. That was my first one. The outlier was the Bullet, the Chrysler, the '07 Trailblazer, which is what I still currently drive. As far as other people in my family, not a ton. Like, my dad was really the only, car guy on either side of my family. So there wasn't a lot of interesting history except for my aunt. My dad's sister spent her entire working life in academia. She was, teacher, assistant principal, administrator, just up the ladder. And normally, when you think of someone who does that for a living, cars isn't really the first thing that comes to mind. Mm-mm. But my aunt had a Porsche 944.
Wow.
Not just a Porsche, but a rare front-engine Porsche.
Yeah, definitely.
She also had a Mazda RX-7.
Ooh, that's nice. I like that a lot.
She had a Mazda RX-7, and then I'm just going to say it because we haven't said the name of this brand since we started this podcast.
Oh boy, what could it be?
She had 2 Saabs.
A Saab.
Were they turbo Saabs?
Turbo Saabs, 5-speed manuals.
Good for her.
Hatchback Saabs.
Key on the floor?
Key on the floor,
Yeah.
yes! The key on the floor Saabs. Absolutely. So go Auntie Donna.
I only mentioned Saab in the blog post.
Yep.
People should ask if I drove a Saab.
It did kind of look Saabish.
For the record, this podcast today has brought around 2 previously unmentioned manufacturers, Saab and Renault.
And Merkur.
Well, yeah, even that one.
But
that's just a...
Is that
just a branch of Ford.
It's still super bizarre.
It's weird.
Yeah, so we're dipping into the unknowns here a little bit.
That weird branch of the family tree that has the tent caterpillars
also
on it.
Plymouth.
We had a Plymouth sighting. So I mean, it's easy to see where I get my affinity from. I mentioned on a different episode that I was looking at getting either a GMC or a Chevy truck when the Trailblazer went out, like the Colorado or the Canyon or one of those smaller ones. I always keep coming back to General Motors, and it's comfortable, right? It's what I know.
Yep.
But your dad didn't inherit a GMC from his parents or anything like that?
Not that I know of. I mean, from what I remember on my dad's side of the family, it was, my grandpa, I miss you to death, Grandpa Charlie, but for him, it was always the decision, do I change the oil or get a new car?
Only kept it for...
he only kept them for that long. And it was, it really was I remember him with Lincolns. I remember him with Buicks. I remember him driving Cadillacs. He had one salesman at this one dealership, and wherever he would go, he would just go back to that one salesman and say, "What do you got?" And hey, this is a good deal. Okay. And he would just grab one. On my mom's side, my grandpa had a long run of, from what I can remember, when I was alive, he had a long run of Ford Explorers. Now he's switched, someone coaxed him into switching to Toyota SUVs, and he's had 2 or 3 of those, and he loves them.
Yeah, can't complain there.
Yeah, I mean, they're bulletproof, basically.
They're semi-proof.
Yeah.
Well...
Somewhat.
They're semi-resistant. You have to be on your toes to avoid that, but
Yeah, so I really don't know where my dad gained his... I think he had a Chevelle at one time. Maybe that was his first one.
Chevelle, wow.
A Chevy Chevelle. Maybe that's what started it for him. Again, we can follow up and maybe if we have them all here and we do the round table thing, we can get into that a little bit deeper. But I am a Chevy guy through and through.
It's interesting to trace the threads, really, because when you think about the cars that you like, a lot of times it seems like something that's purely based on instant personal preference. You see something...
And you're like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, a look or a color or anything like that, and you imagine a lot of times that you thought of that wholesale, but that might not necessarily be true when you look back at what your families had.
And we have a pretty good spectrum here, too, where we've got, well, Nick, you're pretty obvious, and I'm fairly obvious. I mean, I've stepped outside the family tree, but only to something right next door and very familiar to me. And you have a thread that you can trace yourself back to, but it's more your own thing.
It's very recent.
It started with your older brother, but it was one car. It's not
Yeah, I think it was long. That would have been like 04.
Not a long-standing thing in your family either. So you have a story you can trace back, but it doesn't go too far. And so mine only goes until my parents were already married. My mom was in med school, and they bought the Rabbit because they could afford it, and that's where mine starts. Versus every car your dad's ever had.
Basic, I think,
is a GM product. So
how did they come to the LHS or what you would have bought that as your second car?
That would have been my second. That was because, well, my grandpa Charlie decided it was time to change the oil. So it was time for a new car.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
So so that's how that one fell into our hands. It's interesting to kind of trace all this back. So everybody out there, give us a taste of what your family tree was. What do you like, or what did you grow up with, and how did that kind of influence your car buying and your car preferences today? You can obviously do that by reaching out on social, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can do it by getting in touch through inbox@checkenginepodcast.com. Plenty of ways to get a hold of us. And again, I'll stress this again, it's important to comment. Let's get the dialogue going. We love the fact that you like it, and we love the fact that you're sharing it, but let's get that dialogue going for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a few people in person, or just over personal text messages that are like, hey, when are you releasing your next episode? I can't wait. And it's fantastic support. It makes us want to keep doing it. But we wanted to start it as kind of a way to kind of talk to people. Spread. We really like these conversations, and we want to have them with you too. So don't be afraid to let us know. If you're not a person for public recognition, hey, shoot us an email and we can just say, hey, listener, let us know this. Say, hey, I don't want my name on the air. That's fine. We don't have to put your name on the air. But
hit us on the DMs, Instagram, Twitter.
Slide into the DMs.
Slide into the DMs. Send us an email. Hit us up if you are more of a public person. Comment publicly on some of the albums and posts that we're posting. To announce the episodes. And we look forward to hearing from you, and some of the interaction we have had is very good. Got some of the spark plugs and some of the pace laps and some of the early episodes came right from you guys, so we definitely do want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, any thank yous?
Yeah, I'd like to, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, I'd like to loop back to the very beginning. I would like to thank Opposable Thumbs, because Jesus, you do not know how important they are until you don't have one. I have one. I should say I have one that works and I have one that doesn't, and it is remarkable how much you have to use two.
The way you're telling the story makes it sound like it was shot off or something like that. I can see it.
I don't have an opposable thumb. I have a thumb. I don't have an opposable thumb. It's locked in a splint. All right. So thank you, Opposable Thumbs.
I'd also like to thank Thumbs to give Tristan these.
I can give you those.
All right, well then.
They only go up.
No thumbs up for you.
All right, so those were 2 thumbs up.
I amend mine. I'd like to thank middle fingers, because both of those still work, and they're for you.
I would like to sarcastically thank my dad for deciding it was a great idea to put away the snowblower before we got 6 inches of snow.
The storm of the century.
So the storm of the century, and then him being out of town and me having to go to their house and clear everything out with a 15-inch wide shovel.
Shout out.
Thanks, Dad. And as always, thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Let your voices be heard. Like, share, comment, post, email, anything you want to get in touch with us and be a part of this conversation. Once again, we thank you for your time. And we will see you again soon. Talk to you again soon. Take care.
Bye. Bye.